How do you become so mentally strong that your silence becomes louder than their opinions? So grounded that their chaos can't reach you? So free that your presence alone makes people uncomfortable? Not because you're aggressive, not because you're better, but because you're no longer playing the same game. This is not about arrogance. This is about becoming unshakable. It's about building a mind so strong, so deeply rooted in truth, that it terrifies those still hiding from theirs. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." But here's the real question. Have you found your why? Or are you just surviving? Most people walk through life with borrowed thoughts, inherited beliefs, and secondhand emotions. They fear thinking too deeply because they might discover they were never really free. But strength of mind isn't built in comfort. It's forged in solitude, in rejection, in the dark nights when everything falls apart and you stay standing. This video is not about becoming liked. It's about becoming real. So, if you're tired of pretending, if you're done with small talk, fake smiles, and shallow living, then stay. Because once you build a mind that doesn't flinch, the world no longer owns you. A weak mind looks strong on the outside, always busy, always right, always reacting, but underneath, it's fragile, defensive, afraid of silence, afraid of stillness, afraid of seeing itself. It seeks validation, applause, agreement. It needs people to like it, because it doesn't truly like itself. A strong mind, on the other hand, is quiet. Not because it has nothing to say, but because it chooses what matters. It doesn't need to argue. It doesn't fear disagreement. It listens. Not to respond, but to understand. You'll notice something powerful. The stronger the mind, the less it needs to prove. That's because strength isn't about dominance. It's about clarity. Clarity of values, clarity of purpose, clarity of self. Most people can't handle clarity because once you see yourself clearly, you can't hide anymore. Nietzsche believed that the individual must overcome the herd, not by isolating in superiority, but by daring to think for oneself. To build a strong mind, you must break from the crowd. You must risk being misunderstood. You must outgrow your need to belong everywhere. Because true strength isn't loud. It's silent, focused, untouchable. Most people don't think. They repeat. They follow the noise. They confuse agreement with truth and comfort with safety. But the moment you start thinking for yourself, really thinking, you'll feel it. Distance. People may pull back. Some will call you arrogant. Others will say you've changed. And they're right. You did. You stopped watering dead plants. You stopped apologizing for your intensity. You stopped lowering your volume just to fit into their silence. There is a kind of loneliness that comes with building a strong mind. But it's not the loneliness of emptiness. It's the sacred space of clarity. You begin to see who's real, who stays when you stop performing, who respects you when you start respecting yourself. Nietzsche called it becoming the higher man, one who walks alone, not out of pride, but out of necessity. And if you've ever felt like the world moves too fast, talks too much, and listens too little, you're not alone. This space is for you, for minds that feel too much, for souls that can't fake it. If you feel that, subscribe, not just to this channel, but to your own path, Because the moment you choose truth over approval, your real life begins. Let's be honest. You don't build a strong mind by reading quotes or repeating affirmations. You build it when life breaks you. And you decide to rebuild without pretending it didn't hurt. Pain is not the enemy. Avoiding it is. Most people spend their entire lives numbing what they need to feel, escaping into distractions, blaming others, running from the mirror. But a strong mind turns toward the pain, not to suffer endlessly, but to understand. Because every wound holds a message. Every heartbreak, every failure, every betrayal is a door. Most just never open it. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." That means your darkness is not your weakness. It's your potential. But only if you stop running. Only if you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" The mind becomes strong not in the absence of struggle, but through it. You didn't fall apart for no reason. You were being given the tools no one else around you had the courage to earn. That's why your path looks different. That's why your voice shakes when you speak truth. That's why you're terrifying. Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you're no longer afraid to be whole. There comes a moment when you stop talking to be heard and start using silence as your language. A strong mind doesn't fear silence. It needs it. That's where clarity grows. That's where illusions die. That's where you meet the parts of yourself that noise always tried to drown out. Most people talk to fill the space, but the wise use silence to feel it. When you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts, you become dangerous. Because now you're not driven by chaos, you're guided by awareness. Nietzsche said, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." Your silence might look like distance to others. It might confuse them. But that's because they're still trying to be everywhere, with everyone, all at once. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call your stillness cold. You don't owe anyone your energy just because they demand it. When your mind is strong, you don't chase connection. You attract it through presence, through self-respect, through peace. And that's what terrifies people the most. A person who doesn't need the world's noise to feel complete. Because in a world addicted to attention, your stillness is rebellion. A mind that thinks for itself is a problem, not for you, but for the systems built on your obedience. You weren't raised to think. You were trained to follow. Follow the rules, follow the trends, follow the voices that sound confident, even when they're empty. But when you start asking why? Why do I believe this? Why do I keep doing what drains me? Why am I afraid to say no? You begin to unravel the script they handed you. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because once you break the script, you stop playing your role. And when you stop playing your role, the entire play starts to collapse. Nietzsche warned of the herd mentality, where comfort replaces truth and safety replaces freedom. The strong mind doesn't rebel for the sake of chaos. It rebels for the sake of truth. It questions not to destroy, but to rebuild something real. And here's the part most people won't tell you. You will lose people. You will outgrow rooms. You will make others uneasy just by being awake. But that's not your burden. It's your responsibility. Because if not you, who? Self-control is not about suppression. It's about direction. A weak mind reacts instantly, loudly, emotionally. It confuses reaction with power. because it feels momentarily in control. But the truth is, if they can trigger you, they can control you. A strong mind, however, responds with intention. It pauses, observes, reflects, and sometimes it chooses not to respond at all. That's power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that doesn't need the world to behave in order to stay centered. Nietzsche believed that the greatest strength wasn't in conquering others, but in mastering yourself. You'll notice this. The stronger you become internally, the less interested you are in proving it externally. You stop needing to clap back. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop fighting battles that aren't aligned with your peace. And that's what confuses people. They expect the old version of you, the one who needed approval, who over-explained, who couldn't sit in discomfort. Now you sit quietly in your truth. You don't need them to get it. Because your silence no longer comes from fear. It comes from freedom. There is a moment on the path to strength when everything false begins to fall away. The roles you played, the masks you wore, the people you held on to just to avoid the feeling of being alone. And it hurts. Because the truth doesn't just set you free, it breaks you first. But Nietzsche wrote, "You must be willing to burn in your own flame." How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? To become unshakable, you must be willing to lose what was never truly yours. The fake peace, the filtered love, the borrowed beliefs. You will feel lost. You will question everything. But that is the beginning, not the end. Most never take that step. They stay trapped in comfort, clinging to identities that were never chosen, only inherited. But you're choosing something else. You're choosing to walk through the fire, to dismantle the illusions, to be reborn, not as someone better, but as someone real. This is the paradox. To build a mind so strong it terrifies people, you must first become someone the old you wouldn't recognize. You must disappoint others to finally respect yourself. You must let go of who you should be to finally remember who you are. Something strange happens when you stop needing the world to understand you. You become untouchable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you no longer collapse when it does. You respond with presence. You hold your ground in storms that once knocked you down. And your silence starts to speak louder than the people who once shouted over you. This is the power of a strong mind. Not to control others, but to stay rooted when everything else is shaking. People feel it. They might not know what changed, but they feel different around you. They sense the boundary, the self-respect, the depth. Some will admire you, some will avoid you. Some will even try to provoke you, just to see if you're real. But you don't flinch, because you've already met your demons. You've already walked through the fire, and you've already buried the version of yourself that lived for approval. That's the moment you become terrifying. Not because you want power over others, but because you no longer give them power over you. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not distant. You're deeply connected to truth. And now, nothing artificial survives near you. Imagine a man standing alone on a cliff. Behind him, a storm rages. Dark clouds, roaring winds, lightning flashing. Around him, the world is chaos. Once, This man was like everyone else, afraid of the storm, seeking shelter in the crowd, desperate for approval. But one day, something inside him broke. Not in defeat, but in awakening. He stepped into the storm, not to fight it, but to understand it. The winds tried to push him down. The thunder tried to drown his voice. The rain blurred his vision. But he didn't fall, because the storm was not outside. It was inside. His own fears, doubts, and wounds. And when he stopped running from the storm, when he embraced the chaos within, something changed. The storm began to calm. The winds whispered secrets. The lightning lit his path. He became so strong, so real, that his silence was louder than any thunder. His presence was heavier than any storm. People on the shore watched in awe and fear. Some wanted to join him, but most turned away. They were not ready for the storm inside. But he didn't need them anymore. He was no longer a man in the storm. He was the storm. If you're ready to become the storm in your own life, to build a mind so strong it terrifies, then remember, it starts not by forcing, but by embracing. Thank you for watching. If this spoke to you, subscribe and walk this path with us.